In this video, I want to share the most important activity that you shouldn't outsource to AI or anyone else, inspired by the guy who sold native deodorant to Procter & Gamble for 100 million bucks a few years ago. So, for the big reveal, the one thing that Moise Ali um, advises not to outsource to anyone, including AI, and I'm extrapolating AI because he had mentioned this about people. I think it goes to AI as well, is the very important task of data entry. And so, how this came about was he was answering a question from his community during a podcast episode with Nick Sharma. They film a podcast episode or podcast called Limited Supply. And the person asked, what metrics each of them measure. When he says he collects his own metrics, which is something that he does and spends a lot of his time doing, I don't think he necessarily means that he's collecting all of his business metrics, but the ones that are most important to him that he wants to keep a pulse on, he actually collects and copy and pastes into a spreadsheet by himself by hand, which I thought was really interesting. Because Alex Hormozi had also mentioned that an observation he had of successful people is that they just never skip the basics, and that scaling is virtually doing the basics at scale. So I think there's some hidden brilliance in Moises' advice in not outsourcing what you would normally see as a task that, you would say, hey, I got other things that I could attend to more than copy and pasting numbers. I think there's something really interesting here for 5 different reasons that I'm going to get into. All right, so reason number one is that when smart people are all saying the same thing, I think it's a good idea to pay attention to what they're saying, especially when they're not saying it together in the same room, but they're all saying it separately, but coming to the same conclusion. So person number one, in addition to Moise saying something along these lines, is Sean Frank, who runs Ridge, the wallet / men's lifestyle company. And he had mentioned on a podcast episode with Danny Miranda recently that the biggest mistake he sees people making is just not tracking their daily profit. And that he mentioned, it takes you like 20 minutes a day, but it's so worth it. Person number two, Brandon Carter, who's in another space, not in the direct-to-consumer space, but rather in the high-ticket coaching space. And he does his own accounting still every single day, and that's blocked off in his calendar. And person number three is Josh Ilizecki, who runs Snow Teeth Whitening. He had mentioned something along the lines of being able to build a $100 million business with just Google Sheets and Shopify. And I've heard him say before that he can feel when things change in his veins when it comes to the performance of the business, the numbers, the ROAS, the CAC. And I think there's something to be said about when you are tracking the numbers as closely as Moise is suggesting, I think you get that effect of feeling the numbers and feeling the performance in your veins. Reason number two is that doing this type of entry reminds me of what old school copywriters would recommend when it comes to copying copy by hand. I've heard copywriters say that they can feel the copywriting and marketing in their blood and in their veins from doing this process. And I think that what Moise is suggesting kind of gives you the equivalent of this data entry process for it being similar to feeling the heartbeat of your business in your veins. And what I'm gathering from it is that the process is what's valuable in doing this and not so much the outcome of just having the numbers. Like having the numbers on a sheet or in a project management system is cool. But I think what happens when you do it is that you stumble upon things whether it's problems, insights, ideas, concerns that you wouldn't have otherwise had you not been the one going to the actual different platforms to grab the numbers, throw them in another place, and then almost intuitively compare them to yesterday, last week, a month before, last quarter. In my experience of doing this myself, since hearing Moy say this, I found that there are just certain things that come up and arise that you just couldn't have thought your way through. You almost have to encounter it by going through the process in a very mundane way. But every single time something comes up. All right. Reason number 3 is that no one cares about these numbers, or at least the numbers that you care about more than you do, period. AI, other people, systems, they can grab numbers for you, but only you will have that visceral impact of being happy, unhappy, infuriated, concerned with the numbers that you see and you grab. There's just something that you have to really put your hands on to be able to experience to be able to get the insights that you should be having but aren't, just because our brains function in really funky ways. A really simple example of this is that we recently added a subscription offer to our website globally. And one of the things that I noticed was immediately our revenue started going down, our conversion rate started lowering, and our CAC was going up. And when I dug into it a little more, what I found out was our cart to checkout rate was about 20% lower than it normally has been for the past 4 months or so. So making those changes to our site, on the PDP, to the cart, obviously had some sort of impact. But the problem is that it took me a week to find out that this was a problem, or at least this was a metric that was off compared to before. And had I been looking at this specific metric day over day, I would have caught it way quicker. I would have just seen it on the very first day that it happened. But instead, because I haven't been as close to the numbers that I should have been, it slipped for about 7 days. And as a result, we've lost 7 days worth of progress. What I mean by that is, instead of taking 7 days to finally find the issue and then start thinking about solutions to the issue, I could have been doing that 6 days ago. And I could have been thinking about how to solve the issue of, okay, we're getting carts, but we're not getting enough people to check out now. How do I solve this? I could have been thinking about that and probably launch a few experiments in the last few days, but now we're delayed a bit. Reason number 4 is less of a reason and more of a thought when it comes to managing a potential objection to doing this. And that is, you don't necessarily need to react to the numbers daily, even if you're collecting them and staring at them and looking at them daily. I think that can be one of the reasons why we don't want to do this, or at least for me personally, and it's the reason why, is I don't want to be overreactive with the numbers. I don't want to be changing something and reacting to something that might not be real, because maybe it's just a day of the week effect. Maybe it's just an off day. I don't want to be overreactive. But that's not a good enough reason to not pay attention and to not do this process, because you do have the option of seeing and gathering the information, but not necessarily reacting to it. Instead, what I've been doing is I've been looking at the numbers, soaking it up, even when I'm not happy with it. As an example, our CAC yesterday was up by 30% compared to the day before. It's I don't like seeing that. But instead of reacting to it and making a whole bunch of changes, dropping our cost caps, whatever it is, what I'm doing is just going for a run and thinking about, okay, how can I deal with this over a long period of time? How is this comparing to week over week performance? And just chilling out from it. Because I think there's probably a subset of people, myself included, who get too obsessive with the numbers, whether it's with calories, whether it's with your weight, whether it's with any other metric, to the point where you're all or nothing with it. Either you pay attention to it way too much or you don't pay attention to it at all. And so I think there's this non-binary approach to it where you can look at the numbers, but you don't necessarily have to do anything about them immediately. Reason number 5 to follow in Moises' footsteps is that your BS detector will be strong and it'll be up almost automatically, and you can really trust in it. When you know your numbers, in your gut, in your veins, in your DNA, in your heart, it's really hard to get swindled by anyone or anything, whether it's a bold promise from an outside agency or an explanation from a team member for why numbers are up or numbers are down or numbers are flat. You'll just have a better understanding of what reality is because you've been so close to the numbers in a very hands-on way that you just understand the nature of things much more closely. You also have the ability to ask really nuanced questions when it comes to outside vendors. So, for example, if you're hiring a creative agency that's pitching you to improve your paid social performance, you'll know questions to ask, like, how are you going to make sure that our landing pages are congruent with your creative? Because you've probably been able to see that anytime you change creative that is not congruent with your landing pages, you start seeing conversion rates go down, as an example. So you're just going to be able to ask questions that you should be asking, and you don't want to be missing where people can be taking advantage of you or misrepresenting what's actually possible. So to round this off, I just want to share some of the metrics that I've been pretty hands-on with myself since hearing Moises' advice and really getting into it. This isn't going to be applicable to everyone's business just because the nature of our business is specific to ours. We are D2C heavy, we are meta ads heavy, and right now we have initiatives that merit measuring some of these metrics on a very frequent basis. I'll call out some that have been really helpful for us to understand and allow us to pay attention to for the sake of improving, the numbers that we want to see, which is mainly contribution margin. New customer orders, new customer AOV rather, and returning customer AOV, separating those out has been really interesting to see. Just because theoretically, one of the things that we're after is bumping up that returning customer AOV, because we have this theory in mind that we want to robustly test out. And that is, if someone trusts us, we're hoping that they're going to be more willing to spend more with us on each purchase. Another number that we're paying attention to, or numbers rather, are the standard funnel numbers. And that's just because we have had issues with it as of late. Our add to cart to checkout ratio has dropped 20%. And we're making improvements now, getting it back to where it was before. But that is something that we're watching very closely right now, because when investigating why it is our CAC went up recently, why it is our conversion rate went down so significantly recently, this is one of the metrics that really stood out to us. And then specific to us, we are launching some initiatives when it comes to a members club. So we're paying a lot of attention now to the number of signups that we're getting on the whole, but also as a proportion of total orders. This way we can start tweaking how it is we're positioning the offer, and also how it is that we are merchandising the offer as well. And the last thing is free offers, in that right now we're just starting off Q4 and we're testing out things to build up and acquire as much as we can people on our custom audiences, but also people on our email list and customer list that we can use for the peaks that are coming up around Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and gifting season. So we do have some free offers that we're testing out. And by free, what I mean by that is different versions of free. So not just giving away for free and losing money, but rather using free strategically, such as buy one, get one free, or free conditional. So yeah, we're trying some things out. So these are all the metrics, and you can pause your screen if you want to, marinate in some of this, but those are the ones that I found interesting because they were, relevant to us now and some of the initiatives that we got going on. And what Moise had shared was not necessarily a throwaway comment, but at the same time, I think it's a comment that holds a lot of weight that is worth echoing and repeating. I'll be testing this out and sticking to this as long as I can. And we'll be reporting back on it if we get some positive results from it. So hope you enjoyed this video, and see you in the next one.